June 16, 2025, Arctic Circle, Barents Sea. At 3:45 a.m, a thunder of steel rose from beneath the waves. Dozens of Tomahawk missiles streaked across the Arctic sky, racing toward Russia's northern defences. In the darkness, villages near Murmansk shook as explosions lit the horizon. Seconds later, the USS Gerald R. Ford unleashed its air wing, squadrons of Super Hornets and Growlers tearing into the dawn. Radar screens across Russia flickered, communications collapsed, and entire defence networks went silent. Not a single American jet was lost. How did the United States strike so fast, so flawlessly? And what secret tactics reduced decades of Russian defences to rubble in just hours? The answer began long before the missiles flew. 24 hours earlier, beneath the grey skies of Norway, the stage for the strike was already set. On the surface, the USS Gerald R. Ford moved like a predator in the cold Arctic waters. Her flight deck buzzed with activity. Jets armed, bombs loaded, every crew member rehearsing a plan drilled 1,000 times. Below deck, electronic warfare officers mapped Russian radar frequencies in silence, searching for cracks in Moscow's defences. Far beneath the waves, the submarine USS Florida lurked unseen. She carried over 100 Tomahawk missiles, silent, waiting. Her crew dimmed screens, whispered commands, and marked strike packages with grease pencils on old maps, avoiding any signal that could give them away. But the brilliance of the plan wasn't only firepower, it was deception. Hundreds of miles away, the USS Eisenhower made sure Russian eyes looked in the wrong direction. Exercises in the Baltic lit up every satellite, every listening post, convincing Moscow that the threat lay far from the Arctic. The Ford and Florida, meanwhile, kept absolute silence. No radio, no radar, only patience. This was the secret. A war prepared in shadows, masked by noise, designed to strike before Russia even knew the game had begun. 3:45 a.m. local time. Beneath the icy Arctic waves, the USS Florida began its silent ascent from 100 feet below the surface. One by one, 30 Tomahawk Block 5 missiles erupted from vertical launch tubes, propelled by compressed gas charges that slammed each missile skyward like steel corks. Within seconds, their solid rocket boosters ignited, tongues of flame slicing through the dark water and into the freezing air. The brief, violent burst of the boosters accelerated each missile past 550 miles per hour before the compact Williams turbojet engines took over, carrying them at low altitude, just 100 feet above the rugged tundra, guided by a combination of inertial navigation, GPS, and terrain contour matching. The Tomahawks weaved over the snow-covered landscape like predatory hawks. Each missile compared the terrain beneath it to preloaded satellite imagery, ensuring unerring precision even under electronic countermeasures. Meanwhile, Russian radar arrays were focused hundreds of miles away, distracted by the noisy maneuvers of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in the southwest. By the time a radar operator spotted the incoming threat, it was too late. From initial detection to impact, fewer than 50 seconds remained, barely enough time to react. At 5:39 a.m, the first missile struck. A sprawling fuel depot north of Murmansk erupted in a towering fireball. Its heat felt 10 miles away by startled villagers. Seconds later, a second Tomahawk obliterated an S-400 radar command post, sending twisted steel and shattered electronics into the Arctic Skial. One by one, ammo depots, hardened lead, radar bunkers, and key communication centres across the Kola Peninsula were reduced to smoking craters. Bridges collapsed under the impact of missiles targeting access roads, cutting reinforcements and isolating defensive units. Electrical substations exploded, plunging critical sectors into darkness and creating chaos across Russia's northern defence network. Inside the Florida's control room, crew members tracked each missile's telemetry with cold precision. Blue triangles moved steadily across screens, each representing a missile racing toward its assigned target. Officers adjusted trajectories in real time, ensuring that each strike hit its intended point despite shifting weather and terrain conditions. The sub-sonar teams remained silent but vigilant, listening for enemy countermeasures while the missiles carved paths through Russian airspace. From above, Russian operators scrambled to identify what was happening. Radar screens flickered with ghost images, and reports of low-flying contacts arrived in fragmented bursts. Many units were too late to respond. Mobile Panzer systems tried to reposition, but the first wave of strikes had already shattered their coordination. Command posts were destroyed, communication lines severed, and defenders were left to wait helplessly in bunkers as explosions lit up the frozen landscape. The precision of the Tomahawks was staggering. Each missile struck within 10 feet of its target, neutralizing key nodes of the northern defense network in under 2 hours. By the time the final missile hit, Russia's northern shield lay in ruins. Roads cratered, fuel and ammo caches burned unchecked. Radar and communication arrays were silenced, and isolated units struggled to comprehend the sudden devastation. The first salvo was more than destruction. It was the opening statement of a war that Russia hadn't yet realized had begun. The combination of stealth, speed, and strategic deception had rendered decades of air defense investments ineffective. As smoke rose over Murmansk, the Florida's crew knew that the next phase would exploit the chaos they had just created, and that the real test of American air and electronic dominance was only just beginning. As the Arctic sun began to edge above the horizon, the USS Gerald R. Ford moved into position. On deck, catapults hissed and thundered, launching FA-18 Super Hornets and EA-18G Growlers into the pale morning sky. Within minutes, dozens of jets streaked into formation, engines roaring and weapons armed. Each Growler activated its ALQ-99 jamming pods, spewing thousands of watts of electronic noise across Russian radar frequencies. On the ground, operators saw ghost echoes appear on their screens. Phantom aircraft, shifting blips, signals that vanished before they could be tracked. Confusion spread like wildfire across the northern defense network. East of Severomorsk, an S-400 battery powered up in desperation, trying to pierce the electronic haze. But the moment the radar emitted, a Growler detected it and instantly relayed coordinates via Link 16 to nearby Super Hornets. Within seconds, 2 Hornets released AGM-88H ARM anti-radiation missiles. Accelerating past Mach 2, the missiles homed in on the radar beams, striking with surgical precision. The battery erupted in a fireball of twisted metal and shattered electronics. Meanwhile, other strike packages leveled high-altitude runs against mobile panzer systems scattered across the tundra. JDAMs guided by GPS plummeted silently, detonating with delayed fuses that ripped armoured vehicles apart. Ground crews attempted to reposition, but the Growler's relentless jamming had severed command lines. Russian MiG interceptors, poised to defend, could not be vectored. Their radio channels were flooded with static, leaving pilots effectively blind. The soldiers on the ground remained silent, huddling in bunkers, knowing that any signal could mean immediate destruction. By 7:15 a.m, the Hornets had returned to the Ford, engines smoking from sustained supersonic maneuvers. They had dropped 80,000 pounds of ordnance in less than 2 hours. Radar arrays, missile batteries, and command posts lay in ruins. Bridges and roads were destroyed, cutting off reinforcements and isolating survivors. The northern shield, decades in the making, was shredded beyond quick repair. Above it all, the Growlers continued to orchestrate an invisible symphony of deception, ensuring that the chaos remained complete. Russian commanders struggled to understand what had happened. Their systems compromised, their defences neutralised, and their forces paralysed. In the sky and across the frozen tundra, the dominance of the American carrier and its air wing was unmistakable. The first phase of aerial punishment was complete, and yet the operation had only begun. What came next would exploit the destruction and confusion even further as the USS Florida prepared to strike again from beneath the Arctic ice, and the coordinated assault promised to leave Murmansk's northern defences in permanent disarray. By 7:48 a.m, the USS Florida, still lurking beneath the shifting Arctic ice, unleashed the next wave. 40 Tomahawk Block 5 missiles, launched in carefully staggered intervals to complicate any Russian response. The missiles erupted from vertical launch tubes, accelerated by compressed gas charges, their solid rocket boosters igniting in brilliant bursts of flame before the Williams turbojets took over. They flew low over the snow-covered terrain, hugging contours with terrain-matching guidance, each warhead programmed to strike hardened bunkers, vehicle depots, and electrical substations with surgical accuracy. Above, KC-135 and KC-46 tankers maintained racetrack patterns, refueling FA-18 and Growlers in orbit. Every drop of JP-8 fuel kept the fighters on station, able to strike or suppress enemy defences at a moment's notice. The Growlers resumed their electronic assault, flooding remaining Russian radar and communications channels with overwhelming static. Mobile SA-15S and Panzer batteries tried to reposition, but every attempt was met with ghost echoes and phantom contacts. Russian operators on the ground scrambled, powerless, their systems disoriented, and their situational awareness shredded. The new Tomahawk salvo struck with devastating effect. Hardened command bunkers were pulverized by bunker-busting warheads, tunnels, and reinforced concrete collapsing in controlled explosions that reverberated across the tundra. Vehicle parks ignited in a chain reaction of ammunition cook-offs, columns of fire and smoke stretching for miles. Electrical substations south of Severomorsk erupted in sparks and flame, knocking out entire swaths of radar, communication, and energy infrastructure. Key access roads were cratered, isolating remaining defensive units and ensuring reinforcements could not reach critical points. From above, USS Gerald R. Ford's Super Hornets swept through any remaining threats. They identified surviving radar and mobile units using real-time data fed from E-2D Hawkeyes orbiting high above. The Hornets fired precision JDAMs, reducing the northern defense grid's remnants to twisted steel and smoldering earth. Meanwhile, Growlers maintained their relentless jamming, creating ghost echoes and phantom signals, keeping Russian operators guessing. No single radar or communication link could function correctly. Controllers shouted into dead channels as their screens filled with false blips. The synergy of forces was the defining feature of the operation. The Florida's Tomahawks softened fixed defenses and shattered logistics. The Ford's Hornets eliminated surviving radar and mobile threats with precise strikes. Growlers blinded and deceived the enemy, overwhelming eyes and ears alike. The Hawkeyes stitched the battlefield into a shared, real-time picture, directing fire and ensuring no gaps remained. Together, they created a seamless offensive, a coordinated storm of steel, electronics, and tactical planning. As the smoke and fire spread across the northern tundra, the scale of destruction became undeniable. Roads were cratered, supply lines severed, fuel and ammunition depots burned unchecked, and communications were effectively silenced. Russian commanders, huddled in surviving bunkers, struggled to comprehend the totality of what had unfolded. Every attempt to regroup, reposition, or counterattack was foiled before it could begin. The northern defences that had taken decades to build were now reduced to fragmented, isolated pockets, powerless against the relentless American offensive. By mid-morning, the follow-up wave had accomplished what few could have imagined. The northern shield around Murmansk and Severomorsk lay shattered, smoke curling over a landscape scarred by precise, overwhelming force. The combination of Tomahawks, fighter strikes, and electronic warfare left nothing untouched. From deep beneath the Arctic ice to the flight decks of a supercarrier, the operation demonstrated the ruthless efficiency of coordinated American power, leaving a stark, undeniable message. The northern bastion was no longer impenetrable, and Russian forces were reeling in the aftermath of a strike that seemed almost impossible. The stage was set for the final assessment and psychological blow. What remained of the Russian northern defences would never recover quickly, and the combined might of sea, air, and electronics had proven terrifyingly effective. The Arctic battlefield had been transformed into a testament of planning, precision, and overwhelming coordination, setting the tone for the rest of the conflict. The skies above Murmansk and Severomorsk cleared, but the scars of the strike were unmistakable. Roads crumbled, radar towers lay in ruins, and supply depots burned, smoke rising hundreds of feet into the pale Arctic sky. On board the USS Gerald R. Ford, aircraft were recovered, damage assessed, and pilots debriefed. Far below, the USS Florida slipped silently into deeper thermal layers, invisible and untouchable, her mission complete. Russian commanders staring at the shattered northern shield faced a sobering reality. Decades of investment, preparation, and defense had been undone in less than 6 hours. No American jet was lost, not a single missile intercepted. Across the Arctic, the psychological impact was profound. Shock, confusion, and a dawning awareness of vulnerability. E-2D Hawkeyes relayed final assessments to Norfolk and the Pentagon, confirming the total success of the coordinated strike. The US battle group disappeared into the Atlantic, leaving behind more than destruction. It left a message of precision, power, and readiness. In this 21st century Cold War, strength, unity, and ingenuity guarantee peace. The world had witnessed a demonstration of overwhelming force, and one thing was clear: America stands prepared, and no adversary should underestimate it. If you found this operation as astonishing as we did, subscribe and like for more in-depth military history and analysis.